all know me. Know how I earn a living. This shark, swallow you whole. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. Find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Mr. Vaughn, I pulled a tooth the size of a shot glass out of the wreck hull of the boat out there, and it was the tooth of a great white.
What?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic.
Now, I'm not saying that this is not the shark. It probably is, Martin. It probably is. It's a man-eater. It's extremely rare for these waters. But the fact is that the bite radius on this animal is different than the wounds on the victim.
Get out of that boat!
Well, this is not a boat accident. There wasn't any propeller. There wasn't any coral reef. And it wasn't Jack the Ripper.
It was a shark.
I'll never put on a nice jacket again.
Back once more in the Jaws obsession, where we are here to share with you, prove to you, convince you, or remind you that Jaws is the greatest movie of all time. Welcome back for episode 65, A Bridge to History. Thank you very much for your lending your time in tuning in to the world's #1 Jaws broadcast, where the show has taken a special tone as of late. I want to thank everyone for making the last episode, episode 64, was a rating smash. We detailed the Jaws historical connection, that is Quint's speech, and how that had actual roots with Quartermaster First Class Bob Gauze. And this episode will serve to stamp home how Quint's tale is a bridge to history. And we have a guest that has used the Book of Quint to connect us to the historical significance of this moment that we find ourselves in. This is truly a special time, and this is going to be a continuation of that, of episode 64. So if you haven't listened to episode 64, you can press stop, go listen to episode 64, and then we'll see you back here. Maybe these 2 episodes should go together, like nice little bookends. I've had many, many emails regarding the Book of Quint. I'm sorry at this time that we do not have any copies left to send out. I'm getting numerous requests from around the world for any available books, and those are on the horizon. I promise you, in one way or another, we will be worldwide later this year. We're very close to that. It's an exciting time. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes here. I would like to thank everybody for their patience who has not yet read the Book of Quint. I am holding a lot back in the Jaws analytics, because what the Book of Quint does is that it expands the boundaries of how we can see and view Jaws and analyze character performances and analyze histories. And that's what's going to be exciting, is once the Book of Quint goes worldwide and everybody has a chance to read it, now the Jaws obsession is going to take on a second season, if you will, in which we are going to be reviewing Jaws in a new light, now that we can actually talk about the spoilers that are in the Book of Quint. So they won't be spoilers anymore, because everybody will have a chance to read it. And then we will be able to analyze and see what details we can extract from Jaws in a way that a proper prequel will help any film out. There has always been this unspoken quality of the film Jaws, and people return to it every year to rewatch it and enjoy it with their families, maybe introduce it to someone who has never seen it before. And it's a joy to watch the movie with someone who has never seen it before, to experience it through their eyes for the first time. What is it about this movie? And that's what the Jaws Obsession was dedicated to do. Is the Jaws Obsession is dedicated in finding out the answer. What is it about Jaws that makes it the greatest movie of all time? It's not just one answer. It's not just one episode, 2 episodes. We're even on episode 65, and we're just scratching the surface and explaining why Jaws is the greatest movie of all time. And I think episode 65 is going to be another brick in that wall, in the foundation that we are building here, and figuring out, after almost 50 years later, why do we gravitate towards this movie in the way that we do. Amazing stuff here. Let's go to some emails. I've had a lot of emails, and if you want to email me here at the show, jawsob2025@gmail.com. I do read all emails. I don't respond with copy and paste responses. I want to respond to everyone in time and give everyone my full attention. So if I don't get back to you right away, please don't be dejected. I try to answer every email. As always, if I have any articles that I'll be referencing later on, I'll be posting those on our show notes. Our show notes can be found over at Telegram at JawsOB. First out of the box, we had an email from Wes. Wes writes in, I don't know where Wes is writing from. If you do email the show, try to put where you are writing from so we can see exactly what part of the world that we are reaching out to. The Jaws Obsession has registered downloads in over 90 countries. I'm always curious about who's listening, when and where. And Wes writes in, he says, "Hi, Ryan. I just recently stumbled onto your podcast on YouTube. I regret missing the campaign. I agree wholeheartedly. Jaws is the greatest movie ever made. My dad took me to see Jaws at the drive-in when I was 4.5 years old. It was a wonderful and traumatic experience for me. I remember thinking as we watched the film, this guy Quint is my dad. My dad was the Quint of our neighborhood and community. People were always shocked by my dad's personality and didn't really know how to take him, but they all seemed to miss him very much after he was gone. You can imagine how I felt as a small child when Quint met his end. The funny thing is, I don't think my dad saw himself this way, nor did he know that I saw him this way. The stories I could tell." Wes continues on, "I just listened to episode 42, and I agree with your sleeves down, button up theory. My dad was an old Marine, and I am a Marine also, and this is how we were trained. Now that I think of it, maybe the reason my dad never saw the similarities between him and Quint was because Quint was a sailor. Even if he saw the similarity, he would not admit it. LOL. And maybe that's why I never told him that I could see it. Keep up the good work. Semper Fi." Wes. Well, thank you very much for your service, Wes. And yes, Marines, and I always have been amused at the little rivalry that the Navy has with the Marines and the Marines have with the Navy. And that you're citing that there, what he was talking about, Wes was referring to episode 42. That was our Jaws Easter Eggs 2. That's where we analyzed the wardrobe of the characters and what we could tell about their history, and not just what their wardrobe is, but how they wear it. And the Quint was the first one out of the box with that. We extracted the way he's wearing, that he emerges from the ORCA at the end when the ORCA is sinking, in full battle dress. That is from the military customs of general emergency, and Wes does confirm that. Wes is a Marine, and so was his father, and he does confirm that the sleeves down, button up theory does have some merit. We did the same thing in the U.S. Coast Guard. So that's why Quint does emerge dressed like that in Jaws. Wes also added in earlier in his email, he said, "I have also wondered a lot about the backstory of Chief Brody. He was the quiet and calm man who emerged as the hero, who ended up killing the monster. I think about the time period that he served as a police officer and when he served and what was going on at the time. I am sure that he's seen his own share of blood and guts, evil people and crooked politicians. He must have been suffering from PTSD as well. He did not stick around when he retired from the police force and hang out with his old police buddies. He moved to Amity to find a quieter life. Was it the quiet and calm hero that Amity needed? Was this Providence? I have really enjoyed what you are doing, and I'm thankful, and I can't wait to see the film." We did tackle a little bit about that in Jaws Obsession episode 43, the Ellen Brody effect. I recently re-listened to that episode, doing some research on what was already covered and what hasn't been covered, and that does give you some insight into Chief Brody's history. The Ellen Brody effect, there is a lot of insight that we can extract by how she interacts with Chief Brody, how Ellen interacts with Martin. What I am seeing is that Brody was comfortable in New York City, and he did not want to move to Amity Island, but that was Ellen's idea to move to Amity Island. Obviously, we know that he doesn't even like an island. He doesn't like the water. So this was not his first place of choice, his choice of moving there, but it was Ellen's. And we do explain all of that in great detail in episode 43. But I think we are going to get into a little bit more of the backstory of Chief Brody as we move through further episodes of the Jaws Obsession. There are some Easter eggs that do tell us some more of his history, and there is more to be discovered when we talk about Chief Brody. So we're going to get into that in future episodes. But great ideas. Wes, thank you so much. Yes, Quint reminds many of us about maybe an uncle, a grandfather, a father, a brother, and that he reminded you of your dad. And that's why he's an important character. And that's why I felt so strongly about this prequel, this backstory, which is the Book of Quint. To get it right, you have to take your time, and it had to have been researched meticulously. I feel that that's why to pay homage to all, not just Quint, but all the people that Quint reminds us of. That's how special this story is. And that's how seriously we have to take a backstory to Quint. It's not something to be taken lightly. And that's why the Book of Quint is, that's why there is so much put into that, into the research and the writing of that novel, that I feel with all of my heart that it will make everyone proud, because Quint is very dear to many hearts of the Jaws fans. And I'm excited to see it go out to the world so everyone will have access to read the Book of Quint. Thanks, Wes. Thanks for writing in. Moving on, we had an email from Jackie. She says, "Hi, Ryan. The only thing I like about Jaws was the music. You talked about it in a previous podcast. As a visually impaired listener, all I need is the music. The movie soundtrack ruins it for me. If I know what the movie's about, I can listen to the music alone and draw my own conclusions about what's happening. That's the beauty of John Williams. He writes in such a way where I can use my imagination. What do you think?" And that was an email from Jackie. Well, Jackie, thank you for writing in. And as a visually impaired listener, that she has not seen Jaws, but she can hear Jaws. And there's the signature of John Williams is telling that story, and how right she is, because if you have the soundtrack, I grew up with the LP, with the vinyl of the soundtrack, but later on, they actually released what was in the movie on a collector's edition soundtrack. One of the things that they could have done on a Jaws Blu-ray or Jaws DVD is they could have included just soundtrack only, just the score only. So you would listen to the movie with just the score. I always liked how some of the DVDs did that, where they take out the dialogue, they take out the sound effects, soundtrack, any sort of Foley work on the soundtrack, and it's just the score played with the visuals. But as a visually impaired listener, Jackie actually says that she can listen to the music, and with her imagination, she watches the movie. That's a unique experience, and also she's proving how Jaws is the greatest movie of all time, in that John Williams actually directs the movie in her mind with his score. How amazing is that? One of the things that she reminds me of is how important an audiobook is to the Jaws universe. We have to really look at tackling the audiobook of the Book of Quint. So Jackie and others who won't be able to read the book will be able to listen to the narration of the book. So I have some ideas that I will be working at a few months from now. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front as well. Thank you very much, Jackie, for writing in. And I'm going to make sure that you will be able to listen to the Book of Quint in its entirety. That's one of the very important aspects of this, is that we want to make sure all Jaws fans have access to the Book of Quint. Thanks, Jackie. Next email, we had a review from Sarah. Sarah is located in the United Kingdom. And Sarah writes in, she says, "Well, Ryan, within 2 days of my last email to you, I finished the book. I have never, ever been so ensconced. I have never been so consumed and intrigued by the next word. As I said previously, I still cannot believe that this was your first book. You had Quint's story perfectly, and I was imagining every minute on the big screen. To be honest, I was sorry and upset that it all had to end. I could have kept reading. Mind you, there are lots of trails of the story that you could indeed pick up and write more of. I will be waiting. Ryan, I did indeed put the book back into its cellophane sleeve, and it does sit pride of place. I continue to listen to the Jaws obsession, and again, I am ensconced. I hope and pray for the powers that be to allow a screenplay, as I feel that the Book of Quint should be also on the big screen. But there will always be a place in my heart for the book. So farewell and adieu from me, waiting till next time. Sarah. Thank you very much, Sarah from the United Kingdom, for such a great review, such great compliments that she says that she was imagining every minute on the big screen. She was sorry that it all had to end. Yes, so was I. I did not want to finish writing the book. It was sad to see say goodbye to some of the characters when you finally have to call it a day and say, okay, the book is done. She says there are lots of trails of the story that you could indeed pick up and write more of, which is true. The Book of Quint does establish a Jaws universe, an expanded Jaws universe. That is something that emerged from this process that I did not realize what was going to happen. When you open that door, when you open that window into the writing process, you start to receive many different signals and stories. You start to receive information and signals, and there is more work to be done. I believe Sarah is going to definitely be a reader of what is coming up in the future. Thank you very much, Sarah, for the great compliments, for the great book review. I'm going to put it in the stack. Remember, every time you have there's a book review and anyone emails that in, I put it over into the stack. That stack goes over to my agent, Phil Pettit. It's just more fuel for the fire. And that's what we're looking at here, is that every one of these reviews count. And I look forward to when we get it more official. We're going to get the Book of Quint up onto Goodreads, so people can log in over there and they'll be able to write their reviews and have a discussion on the book and the novel. One more email. This is going to be a little bit more of an involved email. This email comes from Kimberly, and Kimberly was one of the librarians that accepted the Book of Quint for school libraries in Penrith over in England. Kimberly always has really involved questions. She really holds my feet to the fire in terms of Jaws lore and trying to match things up and keep and actually really going into the movie, into Jaws. And she dropped 3 of them on me here, and I'm going to do my best to explain all 3 of them. She says, so I'm all caught up on the podcast since I last emailed you. It made me smile when you read our emails from Dave and myself in the same episode. It felt like a Bowen family takeover. We both just love the podcast and the Book of Quint. And now, so does my nephew. I am looking forward to talking to him about it when they visit in a few weeks. I am about halfway through the book, totally gripped, and I keep thinking of questions, so I need to get them down. Here they go. For her first question is, the infamous billboard poster in Jaws states 50th Annual Regatta. But there is no way that the hand-to-mouth community of Amity was having a regatta back in 1925. I don't think the thought would even occur to the islanders back then to go sailing for any reason other than necessity. Is this part of the Vaughn marketing strategy to invent some kind of heritage for Amity that is more tasteful than the reality? So what she's talking about is, in the Book of Quint, it's established that Amity Island is an outlier island. It's an outlier island. It's one of 3 islands. So you have Martha's Vineyard, you have Nantucket, and then you have Little Amity Island off to the further out to the ocean. And there's maps in the Book of Quint that detail that. We talked about that in episode 32 of the Jaws Obsession, called Amity Island Geography, where we had proof that's in Jaws that Amity is one of 3 islands off the coast of Massachusetts. There are 2 instances where it says 50th Annual Regatta. That's on the billboard. And it's also on the banner here, Amity Island 4th of July celebration, 50th Annual Regatta. That's on the banner when Chief Brody is crossing the town square, the Amity town square there. There's a 50th Annual Regatta. So now let's work backwards. It's 1974 in the movie. So this would be the 50th Annual Regatta. So it would be 1924 is when the first annual regatta was. Now, in the Book of Quint, in 1951 is when Quint comes to the island. But we do know that Mayor Vaughn already has things in process and going on probably around 1950. What it's established is that Mayor Vaughn, that Larry Vaughn's family, the Vaughn family, most notably his father, has an established businesses and interests in the Amity Island area. And that even though there is no electricity on the island, there is some history given in the Book of Quint. But the town of Amity, back in the 20s, would have been a haven for the wealthier folks to go as a getaway, a retreat. Now, is this regatta, would that be the early Vaughn family sailing out there in order to go stay on the island in the houses that were built there around Amity Harbor? That could be. Or did they have a family regatta where they would go out there for the 4th of July to vacation for a few weeks from their home, from a permanent home somewhere else? That could also be a possibility. But the simple fact is that I believe that regatta is really the Vaughn family regatta, the Vaughn family's sailing venture every summer, and Larry Vaughn is marketing that as the 50th annual regatta. So he's counting that when his father was sailing with the other islanders in the 20s, that would be the first annual regatta in 1924. So is it possible that that's the actual date that when the Vaughn family moved to Amity Island? It's very possible. I honestly, that's probably the most logical thought there, is that Larry Vaughn and the Vaughn family would have used that as first annual regatta, second annual regatta, third annual regatta, as kind of setting a stake and saying, oh, we've always had a town here. Look how long we've been doing town events. Now, what's interesting is that later on, Martin Brody says,
kids can't leave the house. You gotta walk them to school. But in Amity, one man can make a difference. In 25 years, there's never been a shooting or a murder in this town.
So 25 years, there hasn't been a shooting or a murder in this town. By my math, that would be 1949. 25 years later, after 1949, would be 1974. So what Chief Brody, I believe right here, is quoting Mayor Vaughn at his hiring, at his interview process. Mayor Vaughn would have said, we haven't had a murder or a shooting in this town in 25 years, because I believe that's when they started keeping records, establishing plot, land rights, easements, official town borders. That would have been in 1949, is when Larry Vaughn actually started making the maneuvers to create the town of Amity, the official township. Even though Amity was founded earlier, in the Book of Quint, it's written that it was settled in the 1800s by people looking to get away from society. But it was never officially established. And that's what I'm saying, is that in order to be a town, you have to have certain benchmarks in order to convince the state to give you the certain funding and all of that. And that's why that's a very interesting term. In 25 years, there hasn't been a shooting or a murder in this town. That's a very interesting statement by Martin Brody.
But in Amity, one man can make a difference. In 25 years, there's never been a shooting or a murder in this town.
So Martin Brody just got there. How would he know the history? He doesn't really know the history. He just heard that from Mayor Vaughn about the 25-year mark, because that's what Mayor Vaughn has in order to say, it's a nice round figure, 25 years. But Amity was definitely older than 25 years, and there's been a regatta going on for 50 years. So there's an official demarcation line of when they started officially trying to establish a town, and then now, and that 25 years later, and then that would have been 1949, And it just so happens that that lines up with the events of the Book of Quint when Quint actually gets there in 1951. So all of these dates were factored into the writing of the Book of Quint. I think that 50th annual regatta sign that Kimberly is pointing out here, if you couple that with the 25 years, do we actually think there was a shooting and a murder back in 1948, so they had to reset the clock? I don't think so. I don't think there was. I just believe that that's the date they started keeping records. Now in 1974, 25 years later, they were told, if you want to have an official township, if you want to actually establish for state aid for the population increase that Mayor Vaughn was looking for with the tourist trade, as the tourist industry was picking up, you're going to have to establish an Amity Police Department full time. That's why Chief Brody was hired. Very interesting stuff. Thank you very much for pointing that out, Kimberly, with the 50th annual regatta. I think that might be a Vaughn marketing strategy, but there is some truth to it, is that there was some sort of sailing regatta because the wealthier folks that made up the town of Amity, that the Book of Quint details on the east side of the island, that town of Amity that's where all the money is on the east side of the island over many, many decades, and it was started by Vaughn's father. All very interesting. Kimberly moves on to her second question. She says, now I have seen and studied the map of Amity, which is included in the Book of Quint. I would like to know where the dock is that the two fishermen used when they tried to catch the shark with their holiday roast, and where the chief lives. Presumably, the dock is somewhere along South Beach, and we know that the chief lives on the other side of the island, but the island is so narrow. Or do they mean the other end, somewhere between the ferry terminal and Amity town? Also, where are the water skiers in Jaws 2? Very interesting. Now, a lot of you out there have not seen the map of Amity Island. It is with the Book of Quint. She's talking about this scene right here.
I'm tired. Let's stop before someone reports us.
Don't worry. The chief lives on the other side of the island.
Am I coming in straight?
Don't worry. The chief lives on the other side of the island.
So he says, I'm tired. Let's stop before someone reports us. Don't worry. The chief lives on the other side of the island. There is more going on in this scene, and I do not want to spoil it because this is an entire episode that we are going to get to in the future. But what that does detail is that, yes, those gentlemen are on the southern side of the island around Averill Bay, in the Averill Bay area. And if you look on your map, if you go north, you'll see the Billboard Lighthouse is on the north shore. If you look just to the east of that, there's a little bay. That road right in there is where Chief Brody lives. And what that shows is that's half that billboard is then on the way to the town of Amity. That's why in the beginning of Jaws, Chief leaves his house and then drives past the Welcome to Amity Island billboard, then down into the town of Amity, into an Amity Harbor. So that billboard is specifically has to be there in between, on that road, in between the harbor and the ferry terminal, because why would there be a Welcome to Amity Island billboard if there wasn't the ferry terminal where all the cars are going to be driving by there as they make their way into the island? So there's a specific reason why that lighthouse has to be in that area between the ferry terminal and then on that same road, and Chief Brody would have to drive by that to get to town. Just like you see in the events of Jaws, if you look on the east coast of the map of Amity Island, it extends down into a peninsula which juts out. That is Cape Scott that Hooper mentions right after the dissection of the tiger shark.
If he is a rogue, and there's any truth to territoriality at all, we've got a good chance of spotting him between Cape Scott and South Beach. Where are you going?
Cape Scott is that's the extension down there. The area of land that juts out at the east end of the island, that's Cape Scott. Now, on that east coast, between Cable Junction and Cape Scott, that's where all the white sand beaches are. That's explained in the Book of Quint. And that's where the water skier is in Jaws 2. Yes, the Book of Quint also ties Jaws 2 into the Jaws universe because we have Chief Brody there. We have the Brody family. So it's only fitting that we have to use Jaws 2 as canon to the Jaws universe. good luck with Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge. We have to dismiss those off to the side if we're going to make these work, because those have so many inconsistencies that they do not work when even factored in with Jaws 1 and 2. So what we have is, just to remind, just to answer Kimberly and remind everyone once again, is that east coast of Jaws, that east coast of Amity Island, is where much of the, where many of the events are. You'll see the lighthouse there. The Cape Scott Lighthouse is where the washed up killer whale is on the beach in Jaws 2. Then you also have that Cape Scott Point is where the kids go sailing to get around there. And that's largely uninhabited on Amity Island. That's exactly why the Amity Shores project is actually looking to build more houses. In Jaws 2, when you see Ellen Brody as a real estate agent and she's with the mayor and the developer, that they are working at showing investors how much land and how beautiful that eastern shore is. So Amity Shores is going to look to expand and build there. That's where the events of Jaws 2 go in. So if you look at the 1968 map, which is included in the Book of Quint, there aren't many roads that lead over there. It's still very isolated. So by the time 1977 rolls around, there now are some roads there, but it's hard to get to that southeastern area of the island, which makes it a popular hangout for kids that can sail there and get their boats there. Then they are kind of away from their parents and they are kind of on their own. And that's why Michael Brody is looking to sail there, and it's a big popular hangout for the teenagers. So that map actually explains the events of Jaws 2, why the kids are there. And also, if you look at its relation to Cable Junction is between there and Nantucket. So that's naturally where the power supply would come from Nantucket into Cable Junction and then hit Amity. And that's why the kids are stranded on Cable Junction, because they are sailing on the eastern side of the island. That map does a lot to explain things. So I can't wait until when that map goes worldwide. There are many more details in that map of Amity Island that John Tedder and I worked on in order to line up all the events. And that's what the Book of Quint does. It has to establish that map in order to make the future events in the universe work. Is that without all these great movies, all great franchises or expanded universes, if you want to look at Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, or the Star Wars, there's always planetary maps, visuals in which the world takes place. And that's the most logical decision, is that design for Amity Island. It fits all the events of Jaws and Jaws 2 and the expanded universe that is being told with the Book of Quint. So very exciting. That's question number 2 from Kimberly. And then Kimberly wraps up her email. She says, finally, for now, a question about the Jaws timeline. Alex Kittner was attacked on Sunday. The ads were placed on Monday, appeared in Tuesday's paper, and all the fishermen arrived on Wednesday, which is when the tiger shark was caught. Hooper says the digestive system of this animal is very slow. Whatever it's eaten in the last 24 hours is bound to still be in there. However, by Wednesday, it is coming up on 72 hours since the attack. Also, when they cut the shark open, there is a Louisiana license plate in its stomach. Even with the Gulf Stream, could it really have swum from Louisiana to Amity in 24 hours? What do you think is going on here? Just a continuity error or something else? Well, Kimberly, that's a very good question. It's a very, very, very good question. Let's start with that line.
I want to be sure. You want to be sure. We all want to be sure, okay? And what I want to do is very simple. The digestive system of this animal is very, very slow. Let's cut it open. Whatever it's eaten in the last 24 hours is bound to still be in there, and then we'll be sure.
What we're looking at is that Hooper says 24 hours. I did some research here, and it's very commonly known that the digestive system of sharks is very slow. Sharks, I'm going to go to animalqueries.com. Sharks are massive animals, so the common assumption is that they have a voracious appetite. But is it true? Sharks eat once every 2 to 3 days. This is because although sharks are large animals, they need time to break down and digest their food. Ideally, during each meal, most sharks consume 0.5 to 3% of their body weight. Similarly, sharks do not hunt every day and only seek new prey once they have digested their previous meal. They can eat their total food requirement in one meal or split it between 2 meals. It takes the sharks a lot of time to digest their meals, and therefore, when they are not eating, they focus on breaking down the food. So they eat once every 2 or 3 days. I believe what Hooper was meant to say was 24 to 72 hours. And we do know he's flustered there. He had the what guys, he had Pratt and the what guy, and the third man there browbeating him and intimidating him. He has the adrenaline going. He definitely meant to say 24 to 72 hours. And we do know that Alex Kittner was killed on a Sunday, June 29th, because of the poster in the town hall. Remember, we went through the Jaws timeline explained in episode 16, where we proved that Jaws takes place over 12 calendar days. That is essential into understanding the events of Jaws, is to understand these 12 calendar days. For Hooper to say 24, we already know we have been through a few days. We already had the holiday roast scene. That was one day. We also know that there was one day between the attack and the town hall scene, because Alex Kittner was killed on a Sunday and they're meeting on a Monday. There's no way they're in that beach going over to the town hall and having that meeting. And there's no way that Mrs. Kittner made that sign up the same day. So she obviously put that sign up. That's a Monday. So we are many days removed. We're a few days removed. We are on a Wednesday. So why would Hooper say 24 hours? He meant to say 24 to 72. He's being very scientifically accurate. He's trying to say the right scientific shark names during the autopsy scene. He's trying to, but we do know he gets easily flustered in the scope of the situation, in the drama and the adrenaline of the situation. So that's what he meant to say, was 24 to 72 hours. And also what Kimberly was saying about the Louisiana license plate, where Hooper says it's coming up from the Gulf Stream. So is it possible that shark, yes, a shark I don't think could make that swim from Gulf waters, let's say Louisiana, let's say it was off of Florida, and it swallowed the Louisiana plate, okay? Is it possible to swim all that way up there in 24? No. It would probably be more logical, 72 hours or more. The Ocean Foundation, oceanfdn.org, what's in a tiger shark's stomach? Alex Inez, back in 2018, down in the Gulf of Mexico, has a nice little article here about the contents inside. During the summer of 16, they did a study on the contents of a tiger shark's stomach, and they dissected many tiger shark stomachs that were either caught through local fisheries or found dead, and they found around 25 to 30%. It looks like it's 25 to 30% of the stomach contents were plastic and trash. So an interesting part, shows pictures of a sea turtle head found in a tiger shark stomach. And Alex writes, so here's what I did to try to answer some of my research questions and contribute to what we know about tiger sharks in the Northwest Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. The number one question I get about my research is whether or not I found any license plates in any of the stomachs. I did not, and you've been watching too much Jaws. But to be fair, license plates have been found in the stomachs of tiger sharks before. The second most popular question I get is where do I get these shark stomachs from? The sharks were collected from commercial fishermen in the shark bottom longline fishery. This is totally legal, and the stomachs themselves are collected by NOAA observers. Observers collect data at sea while on commercial fishing vessels. Some of the more interesting items I found were entire, rather large sea turtles that were swallowed completely whole. The tiger shark has some very strong stomach acids. A newborn baby dolphin, pieces of an orange that I had to actually smell and peel the rind off to figure out what they were, large vertebrae from other large sharks, sandwich bags, and other plastic trash. Essentially, as the shark got larger, the prey got larger. But one interesting fact is that the tiger shark is just one of several species of sharks that can perform what is called a shark stomach eversion. They do have some video of a shark stomach eversion where a shark can actually turn its stomach inside out and regurgitate indigestible material that's inside its stomach. So when Hooper's pulling out the can and he's pulling out the license plate, the shark is not actually going to digest that. That's going to collect in the shark's stomach, and eventually the shark decides, okay, it's time to regurgitate, and it actually can turn its stomach inside out, and it comes out of its mouth, and it flushes its system. They actually have it on video. There's a YouTube video that I will put in our show notes. Is it possible that this tiger shark tried to do that and the license plate was still lodged? So is it possible that this shark had not done it yet and it still had it in its system? But it's all perfectly logical in the timeline that the tiger shark could have in 72 hours swallowed the license plate off of Louisiana or Florida or somewhere down south, and then came up in the Gulf Stream, swam up, and now was off Amity Island. Yes, Hooper definitely wanted to say, and I bet you if someone pressed him on it, Hooper would say, I meant 24 to 72 hours. The digestive system of a shark is very slow, according to some of my amateur research here. And sharks will eat once every 2 to 3 days. So it makes sense. It makes sense that the shark went from Chrissy Watkins on a Friday, then to Alex Kittner and Pippet on a Sunday, then to Ben Gardner's first mate on a Wednesday, and then all the way to Friday with the estuary victim on 4th of July. So it all makes sense, and it all leads up to 3 days after the estuary victim, which is on the 4th, and 5th, 6th, 7th is when the first sight of the shark hitting the chum line, and when Brody spots the shark for the first time at the stern of the ORCA with the chum. So we see that the attacks are quite spaced out within 2 to 3 days in this Jaws 12-day calendar timeline that we have on our show notes. All very interesting stuff. This continues to prove that the 12-day Jaws Obsession official Jaws movie timeline is the most accurate timeline that you will find out there. We consistently see that it holds up to scrutiny every time we look deep inside the facts of the movie. Great to see. Great to see. Thank you very much, Kimberly, for pushing us on the Jaws Obsession and pushing us to explain some of the very intricate details of the greatest movie ever made. So with that, let's jump into the second half of this episode. For this show, for a special interview, as the Book of Quint reaches its most important reader in the world, which is what we're going to explain shortly, we have Edward Rodriguez is on the line to bring it all into proper perspective. Ed, how are you doing today? Welcome to the Jaws Obsession.
I'm doing great. Beautiful day here in Benicia.
Thank you so much for being on the line with us, because this is a special day in that we're going to get to some news that's coming up here. What I wanted to start with was you've been a very integral part of the Jaws Obsession. And I wanted to start with your introduction to Jaws. What are your earliest memories of Jaws, and what does the film mean to you in your life?
Wow. I believe it's the first movie my dad ever took me to, that I remember him taking me to, because, let's see, I was born in 72, so I had seen the movie in 75, 6, somewhere around that time. I mean, he had to literally hold my hand through the movie. I was glued to the screen, and I just remember vividly how big the screen was, and I remember the curtains. It seemed like they went up for 200 feet, and he had to hold my hand. I wouldn't take my eyes off the screen. And I was affected like everyone else.
Wow.
You know, when I got home, I couldn't take a bath anymore. I was afraid of the toilet water. I was afraid to have my leg hanging off the bed. You know, I was just, and then for Christmas, I get the Jaws toy, that it was a toy that, you know, you would reach in its mouth and grab an anchor or some.
That little game. Right.
Oh yeah. You know, and it was awesome. And it was just such a big part of my early memory that I recall from my father. I remember my mom not being there. It was just me and him.
That's fantastic. See, what I love about the Jaws obsession is seeing how everybody has a different experience, but yet it's still the same in that Jaws is not just what's going on in the movie. It's that family experience of watching Jaws that brought us together with our families, with our friends. And it just never stops, even as you continue into your life, you know, watching it with your family now. It just keeps building memories. It's an amazing movie like that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it bonds people you would never think would have the same interests, and here you are together, you know, watching the same movie.
Right. And that's amazing. I love that. I love that you brought up the plastic Jaws shark game there with you reach into the mouth. Because I remember I had that as a kid as well.
The box was the best part of it.
Box, yeah, because the box had the poster on it, right?
Yeah, right.
Let's take the audience back in time, December 2021. The Jaws obsession hits the air via podcasting platforms all over the world. I remember you were one of the earlier listeners to the show as we were doing our initial countdown to episode 20. What was your first reaction to the Jaws obsession?
Well, you know what? I came across it because I had been listening at work to Jaws, the audiobook. I would listen for a few because the audiobook went on for over 8 hours or whatever. So I'd listen here and there. And then I got a reminder, a little ad saying, well, since you like Jaws, you might also like the Jaws obsession. And I went, what the heck is this? You know, the Jaws obsession. And man, I went to the Jaws obsession, and by that time you were on episode 9.
Okay.
And it was Who Was Ted Grossman? And I was like, what? You know, and it boomed, and I couldn't believe it, you know, and ever since then I was hooked. I went back and listened 1 through 8, you know, and then I couldn't, and then you were putting these things out like once a week, it seemed like, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I can't wait, you know, because I had rifled through 1 through 8 so fast. I should have saved them, you know. And I was like, oh my God, you know, so it was the greatest thing ever, you know, listening to the Jaws Audible. And then having it refer me to the Jaws obsession. I mean, it was one of the best things that happened to me.
Oh, that's cool. And I remember you were emailing, we exchanged a few emails right off the start. You were one of the first, after episode 20 and the Book of Quint was announced and the Indiegogo campaign went live, you were one of the first backers. We corresponded through a few emails. We talked about about San Francisco and how 1951 San Francisco is depicted in the Book of Quint. What was it about that initial announcement of the book that made you jump in with both feet? Because you came on really early as a backer.
Once I realized that episode 20, you announced the forthcoming book, I was all in, because Quint is my guy, you know. Okay. I mean, Quint, I think we all have a Quint in our family, you know, and in one way or another, it's funny how Jaws, you know, you have Hooper and you have Brody and you have Quint, and somehow all of those people equal people that you know already, and at a certain time or a place, you know, you'll have a cautious Hooper or a weary Brody or a Quint who just bulls his way through life. So when I heard that, I mean, the Book of Quint, so it's about Quint, you know, the backstory, and I had to be in, you know, I had to get in on the ground floor, and it was a no-brainer to me, you know.
Oh, it's fantastic. And you have a special attachment to Quint's backstory in the location you have lived in for quite a while, right? Your whole life. Can you explain the history of Mare Island and the areas in and around San Francisco as it has to do with Quint and Jaws lore?
Yeah, well, I was born in San Francisco in 1972. In 1980, we moved to Vallejo, California, which is home to Mare Island Naval Base. When you're growing up as a kid and the base is alive and going on, you don't really appreciate what what it meant to Vallejo. And when it closed down in the 90s, then you saw the devastation that it kind of left behind with the small mom and pop businesses closing. And you have a main street, Tennessee Street, that leads right up to the gates to Mare Island. And I mean, that was just hustle and bustle. And it had been that way since the 1920s and 30s. And so Vallejo became accustomed to having Mare Island as its heartbeat, provided a lot of people with income and futures. And I knew a lot of old folk who had worked at Mare Island and retired from Mare Island and had a great life, sent their kids to school. Right. And all of a sudden that was gone. I still remember looking out of my bedroom window. We had a 2-story house. My mom still lives in Vallejo, 2-story house. In my bedroom, I could see the smokestack, a blue smokestack with the horse head on there, and that was the mare that was found at Mare Island. It belonged to General Mariano Vallejo. That's why it's named Mare Island, and I could see that from my window.
Oh, fantastic!
And I could hear the 5 o'clock horn, the quitting time whistle. We would hear it. As the crow flies, my mom's house was maybe 500 yards from Mare Island.
Wow. So this is the shipping yard. So this is the shipping. Obviously, for everybody, the Mare Island is the shipyard that would where ships would go for dry dock and repair, or even for construction. Military, right? So it was still a Navy yard at that time, right?
Right.
But also other ships would be in there. And
like I said, we were so young and we didn't understand because it had always been there until it was gone.
And this holds a special part in Jaws lore, is that the Indianapolis, this was the last port of call. The Indianapolis left from Mare Island shipyard as it went on its secret mission. That was detailed in Quint's speech in Jaws, correct?
Correct. Up until a few years ago, there was a Mare Island museum there. And you can go there, and for a small donation, you can actually tour inside of, right outside where the Indianapolis was. And there were volunteers there, and there was a nice old lady working, and she would take you around and show you different things. And
right.
I mean, myself, I'm 51 years old, and I didn't realize that the flag that flew at Iwo Jima was made at Mare Island. Oh. So when you see that iconic picture of them raising the flag, that flag was made at Mare Island.
Oh, that's amazing.
I mean, obviously we had Rosie the Riveters all over the place. Uh-huh. The museum also stated that they invented crazy glue at Mare Island. And these little things that you never, it's just incredible. And of course the Indianapolis was there. And speaking with this nice lady, there's a lot of in the Bay Area here. There's a lot of where were the components of the bomb placed? Some say at Mare Island, others say at Hunters Point, which is another base and in the area. But this lady, she actually had pictures of where they had the uranium and how it was. I mean, she had it detailed how she wanted it to be known. The components were put on the ship at Mare Island. From Mare Island, it went to Hunters Point and picked up supplies.
Yeah.
Well, how am I going to argue with her? She obviously knows what she's talking about. So, but yeah, it was just incredible to know. I only knew this in my 30s and 40s, and I wish I would have known stuff like this when I was 18.
Sure.
But I know now.
That's one of the things, the history. It's great that you brought up the flag of the Iwo Jima flag, which I think I saw that flag at the Smithsonian. So now that's over sitting in the Smithsonian Institute over in Washington, D.C., that it was made at Mare Island. So you had all this history that came through that area,
right?
Especially for that time, for that World War II time. I wanted to read something here. I don't know if did you hear the last episode 64 was the revelation of Quartermaster First Class Bob Goss as the source for Quint's Indianapolis speech. I thought it was very interesting here. I found some more details, but I wanted to talk to you about the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the iconic bridge in that area. I have page 41 from In Harm's Way by Doug Stanton. So he talks about when the USS Indianapolis left port from Mare Island on July 16th. It was a Monday, Monday, July 16th, 1945, sailing to Tinian Island. So for every sailor passing under the Golden Gate Bridge was a solemn moment. Silently eyeing its ochre spans, the boys wondered if they would ever lay eyes on it again. Down on the fantail in the ship's stern, headquartered for the enlisted men, some of the boys formed a betting pool. Anybody who wanted could throw in a buck to wager on the next time they'd see the Golden Gate. Continues on, it says, Bob Goss was standing at the wheel as the ship made her way out of San Francisco Bay. Beside him was Captain McVeigh, looking stern and unflappable. When Goss looked up at the bridge, there on the span, although he could barely make her out, was his wife, and she was waving. What it talks about is that Bob Goss, it was the quartermaster first class, was actually on the bridge at the wheel, because quartermasters are, they're experts on nautical charts. They're always on the bridge giving nautical directions. And he was right next to Captain McVeigh while the Indianapolis was going underneath the Golden Gate Bridge on its way out to head into the Pacific on that fateful voyage. A few chapters of the Book of Quint tell of Quint's return to San Francisco after the rescue. There's talk of Mare Island and how the Navy handled the 316 men who survived the tragedy. Last year, you visited Mare Island, the site of the Indianapolis' last port of call. When you took the photo of the Book of Quint at Mare Island Shipyard, that was a very solemn moment, and it really brought things into perspective about the Book of Quint. That I want to thank you very much for what you did there. It inspired me to keep pushing forward through this process. But what were your thoughts? What made you take the Book of Quint out to Mare Island to take that photo? For anyone that doesn't know, this photo was on our Instagram at Book of Quint. Ed, what were you thinking at that time?
That day, I remember because I would have the book with me, and it was always in my truck. And I had my mother with me that day, and I was taking her to the grocery store, and I said, let's go by the waterfront. You know, we can see the nice sunset. And I said, you know what? I got the book with me, and there's Mare Island. There's the building that says Mare Island. I mean, it was just, to me, it was just the right time. I just happened to have the book, and I had read the part where Quint, I hope I'm not spoiling the book to anyone, but it's early in the book.
Yeah.
Where he had a small shack over there, and he was repairing the M1 Grands, and I said, man, I mean, who else is going to have the Book of Quint out at Mare Island and be able to represent this? So I mean, it was a total full circle moment. When I read that part where Quint was at Mare Island, I couldn't, for him being one of my favorite characters of all time, for him to be represented literally hundreds of yards away from my house where I grew up, it just meant something more to me than I think people realize. So it was just, I wanted, you to see that and have that representation of the book also, because it's just that special to me, at least.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear, because I felt it, and I saw that when we were about to have the launch here, the soft launch of when the book actually was started to be sent out, and it was neat to see everyone with their books of Quint around the world. And the Mare Island photo was just, it set what we were trying to do on another level. It brought the historical aspect into play. You have to realize you did something that set things in motion, which you ultimately did this month, that the special event that was happening at the beginning of this month of July, and that you informed me about, I had no idea. So who is Mr. Harold Bray, and what was going to be unveiled at the beginning of this month?
Well, Mr. Harold Bray, right now as we speak, he is the last surviving member of the USS Indianapolis. He was a police officer in Benicia, California, after he came back. I think he's an iconic figure. I mean, I've seen him around town many years. He used to drive around in his truck. On the back of his tailgate of his truck, he had maybe airbrushed on there. It says USS Indianapolis, never forget. And it had the date of when the torpedoes hit and all that.
Right.
And he was always a speaker. He would always go to events and speak upon the events had happened. And there's a Mare Island brewery in Vallejo, and there's also one in Benicia. And he would always speak at the one in Vallejo about the events that happened in 1945. Lately, he you know, you wouldn't see him around town as much. And in my head, I always said, man, one of these days I'm going to meet him. You know, I have to talk to him. I just have to. And then on my phone, on the Instagram, I followed Benicia local Instagram account, and it just popped up that they were going to do this amazing statue for Mr. Harold Bray. And that's when I said, man, I wonder if Ryan knows about this, you know, maybe he'd be interested in knowing. And then that's when I sent it to you, and I said, wow, this is incredible, you know.
That they were going to honor Mr. Harold Bray, the last surviving member of the USS Indianapolis crew. He's, I believe, 97 years old, 96?
Something like, yeah, I think he's 96 years old.
Yeah, so he's like 96 years old. Over in Benicia, California, they're going to unveil a statue to Mr. Harold Bray. So you notified me about that. And then I was amazed that he was in such close proximity to you, that we discussed the possibility of getting Mr. Bray a Book of Quint. But we both wanted to be respectful and honor his this moment, right? His moment.
Yes.
And as fate would have it, this all happened this was all happening about the same time that I was getting ready to go over to England.
Right.
So why don't you let the audience know what made such a moment possible, and what happened next after we talked about Mr. Bray and getting him a Book of Quint?
I sent you a message saying about this event, and then you said if I can get you a book, you know, do you think that possibly you can get it to him? And obviously I was so excited, I put the cart before the horse, and I said, of course, you know. And I spent a few days trying to navigate around. You know, I didn't want to just go knock on his door and have the whole thing just blown out of the water. I didn't want to be disrespectful or anything like that. And I went down different avenues and trying to find out how to do this. And then I was a bit dejected. And I was here in my court, and I asked the neighbor, I said, man, you know, who's been here for his whole life, you know how I can get in touch with him? And he was like, you could try the Veterans Hall. You know, I said, oh man, that's a good idea. And as I was walking from his house to my house, my other neighbor was outside, and he'd been here for 30 years. And I just happened to ask him, I said, hey, Mike, do you know Harold Bray? And he said, yeah, I used to go to the Elks Lodge with him in Vallejo all the time. You know, and then his wife came out, and his wife said his daughter-in-law works at the community center. And it was 2:00 in the afternoon. And she said, if you go down there right now, she's probably there. And I said, what? You know, and then I booked on down there, and there she was, Debbie Bray, who's actually his daughter-in-law. And she was super nice. And I explained to her what was going on. I explained who Ryan Dacko was. I explained, she obviously knew the Jaws lure and what it meant to her, how it encompassed her father-in-law.
Right.
But I made sure this wasn't just, this was a different kind of thing. You know, I didn't want anything except to give her the book to give to him, you know?
Right.
And she said, yeah. I said, could you get a book to him? She said, yeah, no problem. So I told you, and then you overnighted a book, and I got it to her, and I believe maybe that night the book was in his hands.
To me, that was probably one of the biggest honors, because in the book, in the acknowledgments towards the end of the book, it mentions it's not just in honor of the men who lost their lives on the Indianapolis, but the 316 survivors had another battle to fight, which was living with the tragedy for the rest of their lives. And to be able to connect with one of the survivors like that, for you to be able to get the book to Debbie, and then the book gets over to him, that he has it on his shelf, that it's on the shelf at the Bray family, and I was able to inscribe it to Mr. Bray, and that you were able to pass that off is such a gift to not only myself, but to all of us out there that have been that have read the Book of Quint and that we want to see it, that it's nice to have that connection now. One of the things that I wanted him to know, that the USS Indianapolis will never be forgotten. We're not going to let this be just something that's drifting off. It's a great speech in Jaws, and the story of what the survivors had to deal with is far greater. And Quint embodies that. So he's the fictional embodiment of all these men. And that's what we're doing, is we're just extending that story into the future. You were at the statue unveiling for Mr. Bray.
Oh yeah.
What was the moment like? The atmosphere. What was it? It appeared, I see on the video and the photos, it appeared to be a great turnout. What was the moment like being on the ground there and seeing Mr. Bray?
It's called the Commandant's House, and rumor has it that Ulysses S. Grant spent the night there. He got a little too happy with his alcohol, and then they had a jail underneath the house, and they had to put him in there to kind of keep him corralled. And I mean, it's just a historic area. It's like going back in time. And I could not help but to think, because they had a live orchestra or a band there, and I was just getting these feelings of amity when the mayor's coming out and the little band's playing the music.
Sure.
And it just all was too perfect, and it was such a beautiful day. Tons of veterans. I mean, there must have been 500-600 people there. The atmosphere was, it was just a joyous occasion. I mean, the people were all there for the same reason, to pay respects to Mr. Harold Bray. He's still here, and he got to see it. When I gave Debbie Bray the book, and she told me that he would say he doesn't understand what all the fuss is about. Why do people, have this thing about him? And he's so humble. It's just incredible. And I kind of explained to her, what, I tend to use Mr. Bray on a day that maybe I don't want to get up at 3:40 in the morning and go to work, and I have a pity party to myself, and I think of, how bad of a day I'm going to have versus what these gentlemen went through back in the day, and they made it through. And if they can go through that, this is nothing, for me. So he's such an inspiration. He doesn't even know. He's such a motivating factor. He doesn't even know what effects he has, positive effects on people that he has because of what he went through,
That's amazing.
And
absolutely.
That day, I think there was a lot of me's there, 500 other people who may have thought this, because everyone was just, the people that were there were there for him. He couldn't have been more gracious. I mean, it is just a wonderful day.
And the statue is great. They did a great job with the statue. It pays tribute to the PBY. It pays tribute to the Lockheed Ventura. It even has the sharks that are there. The details that are in the statue are second to none. They did such a good job with that.
You couldn't ask for anything more. I mean,
Right.
It's just, you don't just look at the statue for the statue. When you get up close, you got to spend at least 30 minutes just staring at it to get all the details that are there. And to think, I mean, 17 years old. I mean, what was I doing when I was 17? I wasn't being a man, I'll tell you that. And here he was, a man.
That's amazing. You were able to shake his hand. You were able to meet this historical legend, Mr. Harold Bray, weren't you?
Yes, I was. It was one of the, I've met a few celebrities in my life, and other noteworthy people, and this one is right up there with it. Just what he means to me may not be what he means to someone else, but hits me in the right spot, because just leading up to him, he was joking and
right.
And he had, like, before I had my moment with him, there was like 3 young ladies with him, and they took a picture with him, and they gave him a kiss. And when I came up, he goes, "You're not going to want a kiss too, are you?" He's just so witty, And I said, "No, sir, I don't want a kiss, But he was just, I mean, when they say there's an aura around people, this guy, he had it, It was he's just blessed.
Right.
I can't explain it. I want to say he's a national treasure, and I think his story should be told.
Sure. And that's why I think that going forward, many of the survivors, each of them handled dealing with what they went through in their own way. some lost themselves to the demons of the moment. And then there were others like Mr. Bray. The air tasted sweeter. Everything was to be alive just meant life was much more precious. And there was this exceptional outpouring of support for each other and the forgiveness factor. We do know that the granddaughter of Hashimoto,
correct, Atsuko Lida.
Yeah,
she was the granddaughter of the commander of the submarine.
Amazing. So Atsuko Lida was the granddaughter, right? She was at the ceremony. You saw her there as well, right? So this is the Hashimoto was the commander of the submarine that sank the USS Indianapolis. His granddaughter was in attendance at this ceremony, and you saw that. And this is all in historical records in these books that I have in front of me, the Indianapolis books, that she was going to these survivor get-togethers in Indianapolis when the survivors would have their reunion as far back as 2001.
Oh, yeah.
And so she actually made the effort to go there at Mr. Bray's statue. And that's what an example, right?
Oh, yeah. With people speaking on Mr. Bray's behalf, and he had just recently extended to one of the last survivors of the submarine. He wanted to get a message to them saying that he forgives them.
Wow.
And he got the message that was received, and thank you. It was so much forgiveness in this world that we live in today, where people, they get crossed at each other for the smallest things. And here we have something, this is unbelievable, because I just learned maybe a couple of weeks ago that the bomb that was delivered and dropped on Hiroshima actually ended up killing Hashimoto's family.
Yes. Yep.
And then to have Hashimoto show up to McVeigh's trial and basically defend him.
Yep.
I can't even fathom that. The level of forgiveness is incredible. So we can all learn from history. You always say we should learn from history.
Yep.
Well, this is a case in point.
It's unbelievable. That's the thing, is that these men, these boys, were thrust into this situation, which is what wars have done. And it's still going on to this day. And here we have these examples. And I just think that if anyone looks up, we're going to put a lot of these links to these articles on our show notes. But to have Hashimoto's granddaughter there with Mr. Bray is it was an amazing moment. And it's a huge example of what what Mr. Bray became, how he was a source of inspiration that came out of this tragic situation. What an example the man is for the rest of us. And Ed, I can't for him to be able to have access to the Book of Quint. It's on his bookshelf right now. That's just, to me, it leaves me speechless that we were able to get this done. That and that example that you gave about if you are about to have a long day at work, it seems like nothing when you think of what Harold Bray went through in the water after the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. It's an example that after you told me that, that's just an example that going forward is there are no nights that are too long. And there is no there are no pages that are too much work to get done when you look at Mr. Bray's example. And to know that he has a book and that you were instrumental in that is worth its weight in gold. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Ed. It really means a lot.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah. This whole experience means a lot to me too. It feels like because of you, I'm a part of something that I've always loved, and then you're able to make it tangible. None of this happens without you and the Book of Quint and the Jaws obsession, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way. This is just incredible that we live in the time we live in right now, and we're able to cross borders and actually interact with each other and enjoy the same things, that we don't, there's no politics involved. There's no talk of religion. There's nothing. All there is Jaws,
right.
And all that encompasses. And basically it's 3 characters and a fish, right? And why does that have us so mesmerized? It's just incredible how something can bring us all together, and moving in the same direction. I love it, and I want to thank you, and I think it's been one of the biggest joys of my life to be involved in this manner.
Extremely humbled here. Thank you so much. Wow, Ed, that's wow. I'm telling you, we are. You brought this historical connection into play early on, from just being in that area. And what are the odds that you're in the same town as the last surviving member of the USS Indianapolis? Unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. This is set in stone. So I love that episode 65, we're just moving forward with every episode of the Jaws Obsession. We're just making more historical connections. It really is, it's humbling. It is humbling. And I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing the news that Mr. Harold Bray does have a Book of Quint, and it's wonderful to see that bridge connected with the history of the moment. Thank you so much, Ed, for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you for providing such a good source of information, and hopefully it'll go on for 65 more shows.
Oh, thanks. From your lips to God's ears, or what? How should we say? Absolutely. With good fortune, we're going to make that happen. Thank you so much, Ed.
All right, right on. Thank you very much.
What a great example of Jaws fans coming together to do great things. I'm inspired every time that I see. It's just inspiring talking to Ed and seeing how these events went. It was absolutely inspiring. I'm going to put a few articles on our show notes if anyone wants to read. I have an article here, Real Hero Harold Bray honored with statue in Benicia. 96-year-old Bray is the last living USS Indianapolis survivor. Harold was 17 years old when he went aboard the Indianapolis, and he turned 18 in May of 1945, shortly after he went aboard. He was a seaman first class, having just completed boot camp at Great Lakes, Michigan that winter. Harold went on to serve until he was honorably discharged in 1946. Following his time in the Navy, Harold moved to Benicia, Bay Area in 1948, where he worked for the Armory for several years and finally joined the police department, serving as a detective until he retired in the 1980s. Harold still lives in Benicia with his wife Stephanie and currently serves as the chairman of the USS Indianapolis Survivors Organization. What an amazing time. What an amazing time for all of us together as fans of Jaws. We're doing our part to ensure that the history of the USS Indianapolis will never be forgotten as future generations learn of historical figures as Harold Bray, Bob Gauze, Captain McVeigh, and the USS Indianapolis crew. And this history of the moment will go on for future generations. That's what we're doing. And it's exciting to see and to make that connection. It leaves me speechless at the moment. I wanted to finish up this episode by reading an excerpt from Harold Bray's entry to understand a little bit of what this man went through, Mr. Bray. I'm going to read from from chapter 25 of Only 316 Survived, Navy's Worst Tragedy at Sea. Harold Bray's entry, chapter 25. These are in the words of Mr. Bray. As we were swimming away from the ship, I looked back in time to see the Indy standing on her bow and slowly disappear beneath the waves. Even as she was going down, there were sailors falling off her until she went under. A little while later, there was an underwater explosion. We started to gather up survivors. A group came up with a raft, and we tied the crash net to it so we could stay together. There was a lot of speculation and conversation about what had happened and how long it would take to find us. The first day in the water was pretty horrific for this first-time sailor. Sharks. I had not in my wildest dream thought I would ever be that close to those creatures, but there they were. The men with bad wounds or burns did not last very long. During the day, the sun was very hot, and at night it was very cold. After a while, the men developed saltwater sores and blisters, and they would drink the salt water and get blisters inside their mouths and throats. We saw airplanes go over us every day. We shot flares, but got no response from the air. We lost a lot of good young men in the first 3 days in the water. I think it was on the 4th day that I was hanging on the side of the net, and this sailor came floating by. His mouth and tongue were just full of saltwater sores. I grabbed him and tied him as best I could to the net, but he got away during the night. Absolutely amazing, absolutely heartbreaking what these men went through, and Mr. Bray is the last surviving member of the USS Indianapolis. It is an honor and a privilege to know that we were able to include him on this journey that we are taking with the Book of Quint. When asked about the Book of Quint by Ed Rodriguez, Mr. Bray answered, he said, "I'm going to read it sometime when I'm alone at night." That's just absolutely amazing. From all of us here at the Jaws Obsession, and for all of the Jaws fans out there, I'm sure, to Mr. Bray, we would like to extend our deepest appreciation for your service and your sacrifice to this country.
Yeah, I would stay mostly by myself during the days, and of course, like I said, I'd get up on the net at night, so if I fell asleep, I wouldn't float away from the group, and a lot of guys, that's how they disappeared. And of course, the sharks were busy all the time. But I had them, you could look down. We were in the water all the time. I mean, we were wet all the time. There was no getting out of the water because all we had was a net to hang on to. And of course, the guys were lucky enough to have life jackets, but they were only good for 72 hours. And we were in the water already 100 hours, to start pulling you down. Of course, they're full of oil, too. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't hanging on the net, you were up to your chin in water,